If you have ever loved a narcissist, there is one question you have privately asked yourself for years. Late at night, in the shower, mid-sentence in a conversation that has nothing to do with them. The question is the same. Was any of it real? Was the version of them you fell in love with, the one who looked at you like nobody had ever looked at you before, was that real? The answer is yes and no. And the science of which is also the science of why it hurt the way it did. In 2010, 3 German psychologists, Micha Bach, Stefan Schmuckel, and Boris Egloff, ran an experiment that should have changed how everyone talks about the early days of falling in love. They put strangers in a room. Strangers who had no time to know each other. A few seconds, maybe a minute. And then everyone in the room rated everyone else. How likable, how attractive, how competent. The researchers called it the zero acquaintance condition. And what they found was haunting. Across the room, one group consistently rated higher than everyone else. Higher in likability, higher in attractiveness, higher in competence. The narcissists, not the kindest people. Not the warmest. The narcissists. Bach, Schmuckel, and Egloff named it the narcissist first impression effect. And it had one signature property. It was strongest at minute 1, and it collapsed over time. 6 weeks in, 12 weeks in. By 6 months, the curve had crossed itself. The people who looked the most lovable in the first 30 seconds were rated the least lovable by the people who actually knew them. The first impression was not a person. It was a performance. A precision performance, calibrated to a target. And if you have ever loved a narcissist, the target was you. So before we go any further, I want to say this. This is education, not therapy. If anything in this video lands somewhere deep, please reach out to a licensed professional. But naming what happened, that part is yours. Here is the name. What you fell in love with had a name. Psychologists have studied it for decades. Survivors have lived it for centuries. And it is called the mirror construct. It is not a personality, it is a performance. And the performance was you, not a metaphor. The actual you, your taste, your humor, your wounds, your unfinished sentences, studied closely enough to be given back to you, tuned exactly to your frequency. That is why it felt like recognition. Because it was, just not of them. Quick check-in before we go further. Drop one sentence in the comments. The first thing they said that made you feel known. Not the love line. The strange precision moment. The detail they should not have known. I read every single one. And if any of this is starting to land, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm to send this to the next person who has been carrying this question for years. What you fell in love with had a name. And what comes next has one too. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Because if you have lived this, you already know how the next part begins. Example 1. The strange precision. You met them. Inside the first hour, something kept happening that you could not quite name. They liked the band you liked. Fine, people share music. They liked the niche film almost no one had seen. Okay, strange. They had read the book on your shelf you had almost forgotten was there. They had read it twice. They had your one strange political opinion, the one you barely admit at parties. Same opinion. They had your sense of humor, not the surface version. The specific kind. The one that is hard to describe and harder to find. And every overlap was exactly on the part of you that mattered most. Not a single one was off. Here is the part you did not have language for at the time. Real shared taste has gaps. You liked the band, they liked the band, but you preferred the second album, and they preferred the third. That is real. Real overlap is jagged. Constructed overlap has no friction. The cleanness was the signal. A researcher named Amy Brunell in 2008 showed something that explains this exactly. Narcissists construct a tailored version of themselves to win the room. The room they were building was not a friend group. It was a target group of one. And the target was you. You said something out loud you had never said. You half expected the stranger across from you to look at you like you were strange. They did not. They said it back to you in slightly different words. You felt seen. Of course you did. Recognition feels like the most sacred thing a stranger can give you, especially if no one ever gave it to you growing up. Example 2. The matching wounds. 3 weeks in. Sometimes 3 days in. They told you something they had never told anyone. A wound that matched yours. A father who was hard. A mother who was not there. A version of grief you had not even told them about yet, but they were already grieving its mirror. And then they named the future. Where you would live. The dog you would have. The wedding you did not have to plan, because they had been picturing it since week 2. You met someone in October, and by November you were already inside a story they were telling about Christmas the next year. Here is what you did not have language for. Real intimacy is earned through time. Constructed intimacy is imported through trauma. Sharing a wound is the fastest known shortcut to bonding. The people who use it deliberately know that. Future faking is the same shortcut, just for time. They are not predicting the future. They are collapsing the present, so you do not have time to look at what is actually in the room. The psychologist Keith Campbell has spent his career studying the narcissist relationship arc. He calls the early phase idealization. And idealization is not romance. It is a phase. With a clock. The signature is not the warmth. It is the speed. They asked you, on date 3, whether you had ever thought about kids. Not the way someone with hope asks. The way someone with a script asks. And you almost said yes, because the warmth in their face looked like hope. The warmth in their face was hope. It just was not hope for you. It was hope that you would say yes. Example 3. The empty center. This one is the hardest, so try it slowly. Do not think about how they made you feel. Think about them, their inner life. What they were afraid of when nobody was watching. What they wanted that did not involve you. What made them themselves, separate from how they reflected you. Most people who have lived this go quiet at this question. Not because they cannot remember. Because there is not anything to remember. This is the part that sounds cruel and is not. The reason you can describe how they made you feel about yourself in obsessive detail, but you cannot describe them, is because there was nothing in the center of the room except you. And here is what Bach, Schmuckel, and Egloff found in 2010. The first impression effect collapses over time. Not because the person changed, because there was nothing underneath the impression to hold it up. The construct is, by definition, a vacuum with a reflective surface. There was no other content. That is why it felt so pure. Pure means uncontaminated. And uncontaminated, in this case, means empty. Here is the full framework. The mirror construct has 3 pieces, and you have already lived all 3 of them. The reflection. Brunel and her colleagues called it a constructed in-group self. They studied you, then performed you back. That is why it felt like recognition. It was, just not of them. The acceleration. Campbell called it idealization. And idealization is not romance. It is a phase. With a clock. They imported intimacy you had not earned yet. That is why it felt like fate. It was not. It was velocity. The vacuum. Bach, Schmuckel and Egloff showed that the first impression effect collapses over time, because there is nothing underneath it to hold it up. There was nothing in the center except your reflection. That is why you cannot describe them now. Not because you forgot, because there was nothing there to remember. And here is why this works on intelligent, self-aware people. The mirror construct does not run on logic. It runs on physiology. By the time your conscious mind has processed who is in front of you, your nervous system has already said yes. And the system that said yes was reading a reflection of itself. Here is what I want you to walk away with. You were not fooled. You were studied. And that is not a flaw. That is evidence of how willing you were to love. What you grieve is real. What you grieve is not them. It is the most accurate version of you you have ever met. They were the room it stood in. So tonight, before you scroll on, 3 questions. Not advice, just questions. Question 1. What did you share with them that nobody else had earned yet? That is where the reflection started. The place they walked through too easily. Question 2. When did the future arrive in conversation, before the present had? That is the acceleration. The moment the clock got skipped. Question 3. If you tried to describe them now, without describing how they made you feel about yourself, what is actually in the center? That is the vacuum. And the answer is okay if it is small. That is the point. 3 answers. That is your mirror construct named. Not a story about them. A story about what was reflected. You cannot grieve a construct. You can only grieve the version of yourself. The construct was holding up. The good news is, that version is still yours. They did not invent it. They reflected it. And reflections do not survive being walked away from. You do. In the next chapter of this, in the mask drop, we will name what comes after the construct. The shift you remembered down to the day. The week the warmth changed temperature. The quiet way the person you fell in love with stopped being available, and the person under them started looking back at you instead. If you want to be there when that one drops, subscribe. We name one of these every week. You do not have to do this work alone. And in the comments, 3 words. Your mirror construct, in 3 words. Mine, when I lived it, was too clean overlap. Yours might be future before present. Whatever it was, naming it is the first move. The human code. The science of why you do what you do.